Mute.
Take it away, Gordon.
Okay. So I hope everybody who joined us can see the screen here that includes the agenda. And I'll let you guys read that. You probably have already read through that. But the events tonight are, we have a member presentation from Bill Peters. Now his is a humorous break, which we all need now, right? So he's going to take a humorous look at barbecuing by meteorite. So make sure you realize that this is a jokingly presentation. He's going to be saying things that are rather a large stretch. So don't believe everything he says, even though there'll be some truth mixed in. This is just going to be a fun presentation by him. Then Tom, and we all know Tom Polakis with his gorgeous photographs that he's putting on Facebook and been supporting our club for years and years. Then he'll be up. And then our featured speaker is Babak, who is giving us tonight the thrill of the world at night. So, I'd like to welcome everybody. Long live and prosper, right? And remember, folks, that this is your leadership team. So they're still working to keeping the club going. In fact, we just had a board meeting evening before yesterday, and we'll bring up a couple subjects that we talked about. But this is still your team. Yep, that's the right button. Club news. Nothing's changed here as far as the personal contact events. We still have none. Greco is still closed. There's obviously no in-person meetings. We don't know exactly when we're going to open back up. It's kind of a month-by-month type of thing. But the board of directors obviously said that it's not time yet. Now, things like picket post. I mean, people are going out there, which is fine. That's a personal choice for you. It's just not sponsored by EVAC. But by all means, a lot of people are going out and having some fun there. Member presentations, you'll see 2 of them tonight. If anyone wants to give a presentation about anything that they're doing, let me know. And a few slides, and we'll bring it on up next meeting, and you can be a part of this. Now, the bad news. Let's see, the Hovater airfield site is no longer available. So, 2020 is still rearing its ugly head. I guess next we'll see locust swarms and our water turning red, but now the Hovater airfield, which is where we hold our major events, along with Soror Astronomy Club. What has happened is the Bureau of Land Management, who used to oversee that area, they transferred it to La Paz County. There's going to be a solar airfield, a solar generating company built there. So when it's going to start, we don't know. Start construction, we don't know. But as of right now, guys, we no longer have authorization to use that airfield. Our authorization was through the Bureau of Land Management that had oversight of that airfield, and that is no longer valid. Now, we are working to try to find other sites, but this just hit us suddenly, and we're obviously not going to be able to get everything in order within the next few months ago. So we'll keep everybody informed. But the Hovater airfield is no longer a valid EVAC or SAC site. And these meetings will be recorded. And we just heard that happen as Tom Osden pressed the recording button. So if you know anyone that would like to view this meeting later on, you can go to our website, EVAC website, and there will be a link to it. Or if someone missed it or want to share, just go to the website, hit the link, and our meeting is on there. So we'll jump into our member presentation. Our first one is Bill Peters. We all can use a humorous break, right? So this is a joke, folks. Don't take this seriously, but it's time that we smile and we giggle a little bit. So Bill, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, let me get all set up here. Give me a moment. Okay, do you see that as full screen?
Yes, I can.
And you can hear me okay, right?
Looks good. Bill.
Yes.
Okay, good. I just wanted a little bit of an introduction. I've been hunting meteorites for many, many years. I found a number of them. I got them published in magazines. I also do meteor shower counts, and I've seen over 21,000 shooting stars, which is pretty amazing. But I just wanted to give a little presentation about something that we discovered that is absolutely amazing. One of the best kept secrets of the aficionados of the meteorite world is the incredible culinary delight of barbecuing by meteorites. And so my talk today is about barbecuing by meteorites, okay? I'd like to give a shout out to one of our original members, Jerry Ratley, who was with us for about 30 years and passed away just a couple of years ago. He is renowned. He did so many things, not just in the club, but amateurly around the world. It was originally with my first discovery of barbecue by meteorite was back in August 1993 during the Perseid meteor shower that just occurred again this past August 11th and 12th. And I first tasted the succulent savory flavor of barbecue by meteorite, and world-renowned amateur astronomer Jerry Ratley led 30 of us out from the East Valley Astronomy Club to an abandoned cattle ranch in a pine forest penned by gnarled wood fences deep in the remote superstitions east of Phoenix to view the Perseid meteor shower and taste the most amazing barbecue by meteorites I could have ever imagined. Jerry Ratley's observing skills and knowledge set him apart from the average amateur, which is what makes him so well known. He was actually the first person in the world to see all 110 Messier astronomy objects in one night in what has now become an annual event called the Messier Marathon in late March. Worldwide now, probably 250,000 people try to match his observing prowess. He also became the first amateur to prove that asteroids had moons when he observed and timed an asteroid and its small moon occulting a bright star, even before NASA even believed asteroids had moons. Jerry was finally the very first person to discover the cooking properties of fresh meteorites. He knew exactly what was in store for us that night and more than we could ever have realized. It was earlier that evening that Jerry had set up a super tall wood bonfire complete with kindling with a cooler full of top steaks, ribs, shish kebabs off to the side. He had figured out in advance the exact spot where the incoming meteor would land to place the bonfire. He was like an old fishing sage buddy who always knew the best spots to rule in the biggest bass, okay? So the actual meteor shower that we were using was from a comet called Swift-Tuttle. And in 1993, it was making its closest approach to Earth. And that gave it a lot of meteors shooting across the sky. And the cool thing about meteors from a meteor shower is they all radiate away like spokes on a bicycle wheel. And if you follow them back, they point to the radiant, which is in the constellation of Perseus. Here you can see an example of them. There are a few sporadics in here, but basically almost all the rest of these point back to the radiant in Perseus, which is probably about here. And what you want to do is know when the one will come exactly out of the center of that radiant. And when it does, that's the one you want to catch. And that particular night, there was this massive bolide or bright fireball that came exactly out of the radiant, straight at us. It was just absolutely amazing. And it lit up the whole desert, and it blew up like a light bulb that just went off. And it just kept coming and coming straight at us. And Jerry knew what was coming, and we didn't. And that was what was exciting. This is kind of what one looks like, this brilliant fireball coming at us. And that's kind of what was shooting down toward us. This is one from the side, but I didn't get a picture of the one coming straight at us. And he figured out what was happening. So he had set up this huge bonfire, And I'm going to play a little video here of just what happened, because I had a friend of mine record what happened that night. Let me see if I can get this here. And it actually came straight at us. And when they come straight at us, there's no trail. It just grows three-dimensionally. But finally, when it got really, really close, it took on an arc and came straight at us. So here's kind of what we saw. Here's coming in right at us, and boom, right on top of the bonfire, and there you go. And the interesting thing was, suddenly, right after this happened, the most amazing aroma I ever smelled swept over us. It was a rich, woody, carbon smelling smell emanating from the center of the bonfire. As soon as this burned down, Jerry quickly set up a grill on the bonfire, which had burned down with the meteorite embers in the center, and put the steaks, ribs, and kebabs on it. A great feast was had by all. Oh, sorry, let me stop this and change lanes. Okay, and so here we see this is some of the food we cooked that night. And it was really a great feast. And it was just an amazing thing. But that's what he did. And it took me a little while myself to figure out just how he did that and what kind of meteorites made that kind of taste. I later discovered myself that only the very fresh carbon meteorites are good for cooking, after I'd found my first fresh carbon Tagish Lake meteorite in the Yukon Territory in Canada in 2001. I had gone up there to look for meteorites and spent about 2 weeks hunting them. The smell of the first meteorite was so amazing that I learned to find them by my nose. I tossed some of the smaller ones I had found onto my campfire and enjoyed a fabulous cookout. This meteorite is actually world famous because it is a very special carbon meteorite, and over 400 scientific papers have been written about it, because Tagish Lake teaches us all about the origin of our solar system. But not a single one of those papers yet describes the central aroma of its culinary cooking properties. And that's what's missing. I don't know why no one's written about the taste of carbon meteorites. Excuse me a second. It turned out that it's actually only certain meteorites have that special flavor. About 91% of all meteorites are stony meteorites, and they have way too much sulfur in them. And iron meteorites, which are about 5% of the rocks that land, are almost all sulfury, and they're like rotten eggs. They're not, you can't do anything with them. The only ones you can make bonfires out of are carbon meteorites. And they're the ones with this incredible flavor and aroma to them. But the problem with sporadics is you can never tell where they're going to land. They're just too impossible. But the good news about the meteor showers that come from comets is they're filled with carbon meteorites. And that's what you need. And the good news also about them is you know exactly where they're going to occur. They're going to know exactly where they're at in the sky. And all you have to do is figure out the place where the one is going to land, so you could set your barbecue, your bonfire wood pile right there for it to land on. And that's kind of what I figured out. Just like Jerry, I figured out the best place to go find those meteorites and to go find where they're going to land. I've been giving talks like this on a forum called the Nugget Shooter Forum for Meteorite Hunting and Collecting. And I've given approximately 30 talks about funny stories like this. And the impetus for my talks is that people come with all these incredible stories. And a lot of people come with rocks that are not meteorites, probably 99%. And we explain why this is not a meteorite, even though it's got iron in it, and go forward. But then you get a certain group of people that just never quit. And they have all these amazing things that are just impossible. And so I finally decided you can't reason with them, so you might as well join them. And so on the Nugget Forum for Meteorites, I've written about 30 or 40 articles that are humorous articles based on the stories that people just will not give up. The one I wrote here about barbecue by meteorite, which you've just seen, is because people believe meteorites cause fires. That's a common urban legend. But actually, there has never been a single case where a meteorite has started a fire. The reason is, in space, the center of the rock is about 250 to 300 degrees below zero. And when it comes in the atmosphere, it's like the baked Alaska. The outer surface basically is blasted by nitrogen and oxygen atoms that ablate and knock off pieces of the meteorite. They heat up the surface, but only about a centimeter thick or less. Actually, the crust on most meteorites are usually no more thicker than your fingernail. And the interior is ice cold. So if a meteorite lands and you come up to it right after it lands, it is warm to the touch, but it is never hot. And if you wait on a larger meteorite, the interior of it, that's at 250 to 300 degrees below zero, can actually put frost on the outside of it. And they come in, they go through the atmosphere, and then they slow down to about terminal velocity, which is about 200 miles an hour. They're not doing supersonic speeds. They go subsonic. And at that point, they're plunging through maybe 400,000 feet of atmosphere where the temperature is 60 degrees below zero. So if you're blasting a rock at minus 60 degrees below zero, you're cooling it down. And so meteorites land in grass, and the grass sticks to it, but nothing ever burns. There's a story that the Chicago fire was started by a meteorite, and it lit up the ones in Wisconsin and maybe Michigan, but that is absolutely not true from the 1800s. The only way that meteorite could have started a fire is as if it had startled Mrs. O'Malley's cow and she kicked over the lantern in the barn in the hay. So that didn't really happen. So here's a number of stories here. I also write real stories too. Like I just discovered 400 asteroid missed Earth by asteroid came between Earth and the moon 3 days ago. And then you go down later, another one came 4,000 miles away. But then here's another one, how to win the world's easiest Nobel Prize. I'm gonna jump one more slide down. Here's one story I wrote, how to use a parabolic lunar collector to air condition your home, because the story is that lunar light is cold. So I wrote an entire story with multiple pictures describing this lunar collector on the left that I made, and on the right, you can see it lighting up the home. And then you go down one more, how to win the world's easiest Nobel Prize for science. And obviously go to Antarctica and fly drones over the edge of the Earth, okay? Another one is how to make authentic man-made lunar meteorites. And this is a real meteorite, it's called NWA 5000. And in my story, I made that rock. It's a true lunar meteorite. And someone said, you have to have authentic man-made meteorites. And so I said, well, why not? Yeah, let's make an authentic man-made meteorite. And there's a whole 10-step approach to how to make this man-made lunar meteorite, okay? You get on one later. I've written about 30 of these, but here's some of the ones. One's called Lights over Phoenix, where I basically talk about you have to keep it a secret. If anybody finds out that the evidence doesn't support it, it'll destroy an entire industry. The next one is Horton Hears a Who, and this is one guy that posted probably 100 times about all of his crazy meteorites. And he had this Venus meteorite, sandstone meteorite, and it had life on it. So I wrote a story about how Horton Hears a Who, and it's about how one of the world's most famous doctors by the name of Zeus had postulated there was life on these microscopic life, and his chief assistant actually first discovered by the name of Horton, a very portly man. Another one was about a lady that found a pit on the beach in New Jersey after a big fireball off the coast. And it was in the papers. And I talked about how most of the pits on beaches are caused by objects that fall from space. And in my story, at the bottom of the pit, there's, because an astronaut fell out of the International Space Station, and there's this huge pit with a guy's head in it, but luckily he was all right. The next story is how I built my backyard deck from melted wood. And one of the posters was, I knew they were meteorites because they melted the wood on the wood pile. And so I said, well, melted wood is really exciting. So I wrote a story on how to make a deck from melted wood and how to go out and collect the wood. The next one down is Meteorite Skew. And this is a guy who was writing endless word salad about these slag rocks. It had nothing to do with meteorites. And he talked about the skew of meteorites out there. And so I wrote this huge story with lots of pictures and of a giant stew that I'd made from a meteorite skew. And actually one other story I had done was somebody it was in the news, had heard a big crash. He went outside and he found this rock in a pit with burning flames all around it. And so obviously it was a hoax, but my story was how to make a pit for a meteorite to land in. So these are the kinds of things I write. They're all kind of fun. And, oh, sorry. Let me back up here or three here. If you go to this website, Nugget Shooter, if you're interested in Nugget Shoot It Forum for Meteorites, and you look up Bill Peters, you can find a whole host of my stories. I'll stop here and kind of open it up for questions. I'm going to back up a little bit here. Let's see. Can you see me still? Oh, no. I think I lost myself here.
No, you're there, Bill.
Okay, can the audience see me?
Yep.
All right, let me back up here.
We probably need to move on though to the next speaker.
Okay, anyways, but if you had any questions, that's fine. If you want to go on to the next person, that's fine. Are we done?
Yeah, okay, for those who had just joined us, of course, that was a humorous approach to having a barbecue by meteorite. Facts, fiction, and some stories kind of ginned up, mixed in there. So like I said, we were all need a little bit of humor. So Bill offered to give this presentation. So again, thank you, Bill.
You got it, no problem.
And we will move on then to Tom Polakis.
Okay, thanks, Gordon. I'm going to talk about this comet, and I suppose I have to share my screen here. Finding that now. Come on, share screen. There it is. We're going to share that one. And we're going to do that. So I think anybody who had any passing interest in astronomy knows that there was a nice bright comet up here in the northern sky, way up in the northern sky, that went for about 3 weeks in July, still out there, of course, and was nice and bright. And this is after years and years of disappointment regarding comets. So great news, and I'm just going to show some photos. First, a little bit of prep for it. Here's a orbit view, and I have arrows pointing to where the comet is. NEOWISE is the name of the survey. And here's the Earth, Venus and Mercury's orbit, Mars orbit outside of it. And you won't be able to follow this, probably it's microscopic, but there's the date and time. And now I'm going to run a movie. There it goes. So what the comet did is it never really got that close to the Earth. But the good news, it was way up in the northern sky. So, oops, and we didn't pause the way we wanted to there. So very high in the northern sky. I'm going to run this again and hitting pause at the right time. And it actually, most of the time that we were viewing it was still like half the distance to the sun. It just did it again. So I'll just leave it at that. About a half AU away at its closest. And when it was actually at its brightest, it was a full astronomical unit away, but it was close to the sun. So you had this balance as it approached us. Its tail got longer. It got more spectacular that way, but actually faded. The brightest views that we had were in the morning sky. And so let's look at that. Here's the morning view of the comet, and this is at 4:30 in the morning, what you got to see. Never really got that high above the horizon, just barely out of morning twilight at its best in the first week of July. And that's when we went out. I'll show you some pictures of that. Then it moved into the evening sky. If you were far enough north, it was circumpolar. And even we had a brief window there where down here in Arizona, we could see it in the morning sky, and the same evening, you could see it in the evening sky. But when the tail got very long, that was all the evening part, which you'll see is between about July 10th and the 25th. And that's when we had all the good views. And this really was nice to get out of the house when we spend way too much time on Netflix or whatever, or watching the TV and doing inside astronomy. It was nice to get out to dark sites. It's a perfectly safe activity to do this as well at these sites. So of course, I'm a spreadsheet guy. I have to put together a table. And this kind of shows on the 6th, 7th, and 11th of July. Went out in the morning, and this tells who I was with in each of these cases for these. And we went out to Queen Creek and I went out near a Sunflower out on the Beeline Highway. As it came into the evening sky, we went to South Mountain, which was terrible. I'll show you an image of that. And then these 4 nights are all about 50 miles west of the city and out on Interstate 10 going west. And just great memories. And the scope, so we typically brought a Pronto, a little 70mm refractor, and then a 10-inch scope gave not quite as good of a view because it didn't have the wide field, but it was good for looking at the core. So I'll blast through this kind of fast. I don't know why I did all this, but this just shows kind of the order. July 6th and July 7th, we'll go out there, out on the Beeline on the 11th, and then here's South Mountain, and then here's these nights going out west of town. So let's get to the photos. Here's July 7th, the morning view. We set up right kind of the edge of town near Meridian Road and Ray, little place near a housing development, but looking to the east toward the Superstition Mountains. And what I wanted to get was the comet rising from behind the Superstition Mountains because I knew the twilight was going to come up. So here's the 7th, and the 8th was actually where I got a little better view of the comet, just the tail coming up from behind the mountains. And so what was kind of cool, actually, I mean, we don't like clouds as astronomers, but having these clouds gave a nice extra dynamic to it. Pay no attention to these bright red and blue hot pixels. I didn't feel like stamping those out of every one of these frames. So each one of these frames are real short exposures. I'm forgetting it, of course, but I think they're on the order of 10 seconds. And then I just ran it into an animated GIF, as you see here. And there's a still frame, probably the best still frame of the group of the mountain range. So this is kind of the, I should call it the southern flank of the Superstitions, the Flatiron. The highest elevations are just off to the left in this frame. On the 8th, here's another still frame. That's Adam Blake, who's actually on this. There's Jennifer and me, one of the cameras running right there. And then we have a Pronto going as well. And this kind of shows you, for context, that's the familiar view of the Superstition Mountains with the comet rising. At this point, the comet, the surface brightness was incredible. It was bright yellow due to extinction by the atmosphere, as Jennifer identified. And the surface brightness was higher than almost any comet I had seen since Comet Hale-Bopp way back in 1997. There's a closer view, a little bit of posterization on that one, of just combining 6 images that I took into one. So on the 11th, I went out on the Beeline Highway. This one, I scouted out this location real well, but I kind of made a mistake. And by the time the head of the comet had risen, this ridge was over 5 degrees high, and I thought it was going to be lower. So you actually had a lot of twilight by the time the comet had risen. So still kind of nice to watch it come up. And Mount Ord, which I think we're all familiar with, is just off to the right on this. It would rise very rapidly on the right side of that frame. So there's a wider field, and as I said, Mount Ord would be over there. That's my still frame. So this is all morning sky. Then the tail, as the comet approached us, and we were viewing it broadside, which is not always the case. The elongation was just right. So we start seeing it in the evening sky. I know this is not a beautiful image, but here's the comet over here. And Phoenix laid out in front of us as viewed from South Mountain, from 24th Street, from that trailhead, the Mormon Loop Trail. And not everybody can say that they have a circling helicopter in their time lapse, which is what that thing was pointing the spotlight down.
You point out the comet.
Oh, and there's the comet, by the way,
kind of.
which we barely could see at all with binoculars. So we knew we had to get out to a dark site, which we did on the 16th. And there's Jennifer and I were viewing with the 10-inch telescope. And then I have a set of binoculars. And what you see here is not too far from the naked eye view and the binocular view, except this gas tail was pretty faint then. That was elusive. You could just barely see the gas tail in the images, or sorry, in the binoculars, but it was tough. On the 18th, went out west of town again. This is probably my best image. Still has a little bit of color noise in it. There's always something to complain about. The problem is that you had to, I have a tracker, a real simple tracker that tracks at the sidereal rate, which will track the stars, but the comet is moving against the stars, so it kind of limits the exposure. And I have an f4 lens, and so I have to use ISO 1600. This is tech talk here. I have to use real high ISO, and when it's 100 degrees outside, that doesn't help the noise situation very well. It's not a cool camera. So you take what you get, and you say, well, that's my best comet photo in 20 years. I'm happy with it. Not finally, but the second to last night is from the backyard observatory here in Tempe in the bright skies. And I just used my photometric filters, which approximate red, green, and blue. You can see the series of exposures that were taken in red, green, and blue by these star trails. So you take 4 through the red filter, and 3 of them each, sorry, through the red, green, and the blue filters, and then you combine them into a color image. The thing that I like here is that this forward green coloration that we often see in comets is present. And then this is real detail out in the ion tail. On the 25th, I went out under partly cloudy skies, and I love how this came out. It was frustrating that it never got fully clear on that night, but this 3-dimensional view of the comets, of the clouds passing, this cumulus, that's all outflow from a monsoon storm going in front of the comet was real nice, actually. And so what I show here is the first and last frame of that time lapse, just to register on the stars and show the comet's motion. You can see the comet and the clouds become yellower because it's going through more atmosphere, and the moon, which is illuminating these clouds, is also ready to set. So it's kind of a more yellowish illumination to the stars. Finally, for my pictures, for my photos, this is have to put it with a Saguaro. And so this was on the 25th again. By then the tail was actually starting to shrink, and the comet was definitely fading from where it had been even as recently as a week before that. So I should have also pointed out that here's the Big Dipper, and we'll do that a couple times for you. Ooh, show you where the Big Dipper is. So that was kind of the point. I wanted to get the Big Dipper and swirl cactus and the comet in one photo.
Where's the comet?
And sort of succeeded. Sorry, there is the comet right there. So, and like I said, this is a wide angle lens. It's a 20mm lens, and so it's not going to be much in this view. So I got just 3 last slides that I want to show. And here's where people used what I would call interesting processing. Now, not everybody is realistic with their processing. People like to push it to reveal details. Some of those details aren't so real. So this was a classic one, and I'm going to name his name because he argued so much. BJ Cameron posted this, and he got very creative. Not one person beside him showed this kind of detail in the dust tail, and never in the history of comets has a comet shown this kind of twirling detail in a dust tail, because it doesn't exist. So that can't happen, and a lot of people got on these boards after first everybody loved it because the colors are so saturated and that sells photos. Then finally some of the more sober veteran amateur astronomers got on and said that didn't happen, and then eventually he revealed his process, and we went, oh, okay, so now we know why that picture looks the way it does, why that image looks that way. Another one is by Gianni Fardelli, and that was more recent. He used a radial gradient filter that people use for solar eclipses and did that to the coma. This is probably real detail going back in the tail, but you wouldn't see that happening, these radial features. And to his credit, after not many messages saying, I don't think you can do that, or that's not real detail, then he retracted it and said, okay, that's not a real image. You know, that's a detail that's spurious. So it's real easy to over-process images is the lesson here, and get details that don't really exist. Finally, John Schumack, a very good photographer in Ohio, took this decent photo of it, and it got posted by Dave Eicher as a binocular view. And amateur astronomers know that binocular views don't really look like that. So the winning comment on Facebook for all of these was by Alexi Pace, who said, as seen in an episode of the A-Team, perhaps. So there's your binocular view. That's your Hollywood binocular template put over the comet. And that's what I have. Hopefully we will, just like when Comet Hyakutake came by in 1996, it was upstaged by Hale-Bopp in 1997. So maybe next year we're going to have a comet that's as good or better as this NEOWISE comet was. Okay, thanks a lot. I will unshare my screen now.
What does that mean?
Yeah. Okay, and I'm going to get off and let Gordon or Tom take over. Hope I didn't go too long.
No, perfect, Tom. And Tom, thank you so much. Again, everybody who is on our Facebook, EVAC Facebook page, knows Tom's pictures very well. Fantastic job. He makes it look so easy, but we all know that it's quite a lot of work, and we sure thank Tom for sharing his hard work with us. So Tom Mosden, I'll hand it over to you for our introduction of the main speaker.
Thanks, Gordon. And if you have questions for Tom's talk, please put them in the Q&A. It's easier for us to see it. And Tom can type his answers as they pop up. So it's my pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker today, Babak Tafreshi. He's an award-winning photographer that works with National Geographic, Sky and Telescope, and the European Southern Observatory. He's also a freelance science journalist and astronomy communicator using all sorts of media. And he travels all around the world to get the best shots he can, Sahara, Himalayas, Antarctica. And he's also a member of the Astronomers Without Borders organization. It's an international organization to bridge between cultures and connect people around the world through their common interest of astronomy. And he's won many awards. And he's also started, I'm not sure how to term it. It's the World at Night effort, which photographs various the night sky in various places around the world. So without me talking anymore, I will turn the meeting over to Babak, and we'll enjoy his talk.
Thank you, Thomas. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to talk with amateur astronomers in Arizona and those who are in other states joining us tonight. My work of World at Night Photography is a team collaboration with 40 photographers in 20 countries. We work as a team. It's a nonprofit, but each one of us has its own project and business in photography. Some of us are professional photographers, meaning living from this. Some are educators or astronomers. So they're a very diverse group of people in different countries. My story started about 25, 26 years ago when I was a teenager, and I gradually became an amateur astronomer and then professional photographer and journalist, which I will explain later on in the talk. Let me share you my screen and then we can begin. The story of the World at Night photography doesn't really begins with total darkness. Night escape photography is much broader than astrophotography, which we are more familiar with. In night escape photography, you can aim for atmospheric phenomena, twilight, dusk, and dawn, and even sometimes a foreground at night with only a few stars above. So it's not necessarily about astronomy, but since most of us in the World at Night team are coming from an astronomy side, we're entering more of these astronomical aspects to the images, so it becomes more useful for astronomy communicators and educators. This is an image only a few minutes after sunset from La Palma, one of the astronomers' paradise, a stargazing destination for European people, which is located within Spain, although it's only 300 kilometers away from the coast of Africa. I go there every year for my annual Astromaster workshop, and people come from different countries for this week-long event. But this year, unfortunately, I missed it due to the pandemic. So During this time, only a few minutes after sunset or a few minutes before sunrise, you have the opportunity to see and photograph a fantastic atmospheric phenomena which most people miss because they don't know what they're looking at. The horizon could be obscured or the sky is not transparent enough. This is in northern Arizona, Grand Canyon, and on the right side, you're seeing the Earth's shadow, the blue band, and on the left side is the glow of the sunset, which is already done, but still the horizon is overexposed. And you can see the warm glow of the sunset is casting on one side of the canyon, while the other side is illuminated by the blue band of the Earth's shadow. This is the closer look with that extinct volcano on the edge of the canyon. At the same time, you may see the rays, the crepuscular rays or anti-crepuscular rays like this one during a morning conjunction of Moon and Venus near Mount Kilimanjaro in Kenya. I was there on a project, and one side of the project was to photograph the animals at nighttime under the moonlight. And this was the best person I could find to guide me at night. One of the tribe man, a leader of the tribe locally, who was known with a very keen eye at nighttime. So he was the safety of the tribe as well, the safety of their village, because he could identify the animals at night. And then I realized what large a spectrum of abilities we have for vision, of human vision, because I couldn't see anything, even with moonlight, but he could easily show me the animals. And then after a couple of seconds of exposure, it was visible, illuminated by the moon, like this couple of giraffe with the backdrop of Kilimanjaro. There's a very bright moon, so very short exposure was enough. Even within the short exposure, there was another giraffe on the left side, which is moving and blurred. And there's another one here. There is a zebra just next to the giraffe, which is looking at me. So that the noise of the shutter and the noise of the mirror in my DSLR was enough for the giraffe to be sensitive to my presence there. Later in the night, when the moon was gone, it was just total darkness in Kilimanjaro area, with Carina Nebula, one of the gems of the southern sky, visible on the left side. And the Magellanic Clouds are neighboring galaxies, which are the dwarf satellite galaxies around the Milky Way, visible between our earthly clouds passing by. Across the planet, now we are in Wyoming, in Yellowstone National Park. One of the geysers is viewed in the foreground, while the Milky Way and brightest star Antares is right above it. I have illuminated the foreground with a portable LED light. Across the planet, now we are in Himalayas. And the moonlight, as well as twilight, is illuminating the foreground with the stars on the backdrop. So if you compare some of these images, some are quite useful for astronomers and educators, but some are more oriented towards the story on Earth. So that's why night escape photography is broader than astrophotography itself in terms of the aspects it's covering. This could be a very good example of a night escape photo which has more astronomy side in it, especially showing the southern sky with the prominent constellation Orion looking upside down in the center, and Pleiades on the left side. The foreground is the ice formation typical to very high altitudes of the Andes, illuminated by about 50% moon phase, which was the first quarter moon. Moon is very useful to night escape photographers because it uniformly illuminates the foreground for you. But if it's too bright, then the sky becomes completely vanished. That's why I usually use either a quarter moon or a bit less, like a thick crescent moon for illumination. Sirius, the brightest star in the entire night sky, because it's very close to us, only 8 light years away in our galactic neighborhood, is on the upper left. And the second brightest star in our night sky, which is not that dazzling in this image, is right on the horizon. This is the view from northern latitude of about 28 degrees. Canopus is not that visible from higher latitudes. And then when you reach 35, it's almost becoming impossible. 36.7 would be the very end limit of seeing Canopus. And as you go lower and lower, it becomes more evident star. Night sky is very dynamic, regardless of where you're going, but especially in the Arctic latitudes, in anywhere near the magnetic poles of our planet, you will see plenty of activity in the night sky due to the solar wind attracted by our magnetic field. I will go back to the aurora later on in the webinar, but just as an example of what diversity of light source we have in the images. And these are the listed light source I use for illumination in the foreground. It begins with this image on the right side, which is in fact very nice, interesting story personally to me, because this was the night I decided to shift from analog to digital forever. It was back in 2007. I was doing film photography for a long time, and then I realized this new camera by Canon, which could really reveal a lot of details of the stars, and resolution was good enough for large prints. And as soon as I got this image, I used the diffuser filter on the lens to pop out the stars of the constellations. I realized this is the time to shift to digital. In the foreground, you have light of the cars passing by. By that time, I was still living in Iran, and this is the high altitude mountains, not far from Tehran, only a couple of hours drive from the capital, Tehran. Moonlight, light pollution of Tehran on the right side. So these are a combination of several light sources: twilight, moon, artificial light here. Then we have other things which is more effective when it's totally dark, such as starlight and the Milky Way, or even zodiacal light could be a source of illumination. Aurora could be, and last could be air glow that is illuminating part of your foreground. And it is indeed the art of handling the ambient lights. This is just a starlight and the Milky Way illumination. It's mainly a sky glow from a little bit of light pollution from nearby towns. I'm on the very south end of Australia, the main part of the continent in Victoria, looking over the Southern Ocean. So there is nothing else over the south until you get to Antarctica. So absolutely no light pollution. And the Milky Way is sinking to the ocean. From Australia, let's have a look at the definition of nightscape photography one more time. It could be just architectural wonders at night or natural attractions. Often includes the night sky above interesting landscapes because you like to communicate with public using these landscapes. They're familiar with these foregrounds, and then you can bridge to the night sky, which often is very abstract and unfamiliar to the public nowadays due to the light pollution and our lifestyle in cities. It can express the principles of practical astronomy. And this is the one thing I really like about these images, often at the time and location, which make them quite unique, because when you have a celestial phenomena in the image and particular light condition and sky configuration, these images may not repeat easily in your lifetime. And as part of nature photography, this is my personal, of course, belief of these images. It's based on realistic documentation of nature. So in Tuan group, we do not add or remove things in the sky. We do not usually blend the exposures. Most of the Tuan photographers are doing single exposure or single exposure panoramas. Time to time, we include multiple exposures as well for educational purposes, or when the image is impossible to produce with a single exposure. But as much as we can, it's based on single exposure photography, just single shot or single fixed exposures over a panorama like this one you're looking at. It's 6 shots with the fixed setting of the camera, just continuously done. The reason is that, for example, it's very typical by professional photographers which are doing nighttime photography just occasionally that they double expose the moon over a certain area of the picture they like. And this was very popular in the past, in the analog time as well. And I was always against it because if the moon was not in a particular location in the sky, you're changing the rules of nature. If you regard moon like part of wildlife, so if you regard moon as a cheetah, for example, you cannot double expose a cheetah on top of an elephant in wildlife photography. So if we have this perspective to the night sky that these are elements of nature, I think then we should respect them in photography as well, by not removing or relocating elements of the night sky in the images. So continuing with some of the advantage of doing wide angle night sky images, they're often showing the same field of view as you can see with unaided eye. But they're not exactly the way you can see them. For example, this image from a tropical rainforest in Brazil is deeper than what you can see with your own eyes because it's a long exposure, the camera is sensitive and the lens is fast. And also there are colors that you cannot see with unaided eyes. You can see a lot of these patterns of the Milky Way, but the color of the Milky Way is impossible to see with our own eyes because it's so scattered and diffuse. You can see the color of bright stars, but not a diffuse faint object like this. They're unique based on location, sky events, and light situation. As I mentioned, they usually have less post-processing than deep sky photography, which is very much relying on stacking a number of shots. And they lack scientific data. You're not looking to discover things in these wide angle images, although time to time it may happen. A unique fireball, atmospheric phenomena no one was aware of before. So these things can happen too. I think photography has 4 main elements that if you put them all together, the image becomes more powerful and can change society, can change people or motivate them much more. It's art, technique, moment, and a story. The first 3 is usually very evident by many photographers, but then a story comes and completes that. If you compare nightscape photography with astrophotography, in this style you have to be very compact and very mobile. Therefore, selecting the size of the lens and camera and tripod, it's very important based on the kind of trip you're doing. And for example, here I was very compact, but then in a windy night on the very edge of this really deep caldera, I didn't want to lose the tripod. And the camera, of course. So I made it much more heavier with adding a bag filled with rocks from nearby of the tripod. If you compare it with astrophotography, in one night you're fixed in one location, and you're shooting just a couple of subjects because of long exposures. But in nightscape photography, you move from one foreground to the other. In nightscape photography, you have a very wide angle field of view most of the time, like the image on the left side. But the square marking Orion Nebula shows you the field of view of a telescope. So these two can complete each other in order to give a better perspective of our universe to people. Nightscape photography is sometimes based on single short exposures and sometimes time-lapse videos that take several hours. You can stack them together to create a long exposure, such as the image on the right side, or create a video out of this. If you point the camera towards the north, in the northern hemisphere or south in the southern, then you end up with these circumpolar trails around the celestial pole in the sky, which is the axis of the Earth rotation. However, these kind of images has some challenges. For example, this image, again from 2007 when I started digital photography, is fine looking photograph, but there is an issue, especially for those of you who started this type of photography in film. You realize the stars are not that colorful. The stars has lost their natural color because of the sensor. The pixels on the sensor are saturated with the starlight. Therefore, they do not recognize the color anymore, and they lack revealing these natural colors. However, on film, because the sensitivity is not fixed and it's dropping over the time, and the grain size are larger than what we have for the pixels, you can reveal many of these colors. On the right side, picture by my colleague Oshin Zakarian, and the same, almost the same year with another film, you see it on the left side. You know, look at these images of Orion, and every single star has its own color. And still today, it's not easy to reveal these colors with digital cameras. Nowadays, I do more and more long exposure, single exposure with digital cameras up to 45 minutes. And with newer sensors, it's better because then the image won't be that noisy. And then you can almost get to the point that it shows natural looking star trail. Long exposure star trail has another challenge too. And here it is, satellites and airplanes. In Grand Canyon, now with the pandemic, of course, it's less traffic, but in a typical night, you have so many satellites, and more than that, bright airplanes. You have to wait until early in the morning, like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., to get a decent shot, long exposure without these trails. And this is the same in many other parts of the world as well. A typical question I receive on social media is, are these images visible to our eyes in the same way? So a photographer standing in Grand Teton National Park for this moment, when the moon was rising on the other horizon, the Milky Way was above the Grand Teton. You see the light of Jackson Town on the left side. What could I see visually? This would be the view almost. The color of the Milky Way is gone. You still see the color of Antares. Milky Way is spectacular to the eye, but not as high contrast as you capture it in the image. And the main difference is the colors and the amount of background stars, because a typical exposure of these cameras, for example, maybe starting with this one, a typical exposure such as this with a fast lens easily gets you to magnitude 8, 7, 8. When you use a telephoto lens like this one, in 10-second, 15-second exposure like this, you pass magnitude 9. So this is much more than what human eye can see. So some of the images we do in Tuan are representing our naked eye views of the night sky, plus the colors, which is revealed to the camera. And some occasionally are much deeper and showing what the technology is enabling us on a single exposure photograph. I was really surprised when this came out a couple of years ago. I was trying a new lens by Sigma 105 1.4, which is super sharp even at 1.4, and the Nikon astrophotography camera D810A, which has now another companion by Canon EOS RA. And I was really surprised that in 15 seconds with these new cameras and new lenses tracked, you can reveal so many details of nebulosity, and you're looking at Antares on the right side with raw Fuki nebulosity and a couple of emission nebula around the tail of a scorpion on the left side, above Sierras in California. If you look closer to the screen, you will see that the Sierra Mountains are a bit blurred because of the tracking I was using during the 15 seconds. Another typical question I receive is, what is the natural color of the Milky Way? Because the color is not visible to the eye, people are very confused on what color they should do in their processing, and they're not sure the image they're looking is fake or real. And unfortunately, since most of the night escape photographers are not familiar with practical astronomy, and they think the Milky Way could be any color. So they just simply change it to the color that they like or they feel better. And if you compare it with daytime photography, if you compare it with wildlife photography, you don't change the color of an elephant to what you feel better. You know, there is a natural color for that animal. And this is the same. An element of nature has its natural physical color, which we have explanation for it. So as an experiment, about 11 years ago, I posted this image on the right side. It was with a modified camera on Facebook, and let it to appear for a few days. And then I posted the other one on the left side, which has the natural color. So the one on the right side, which is totally wrong, received 10 times more impression by the audience. And that's why maybe so many photographers are changing these colors to something which I regard fake. The Milky Way is never like this purple red. It's mainly pale yellow. Some areas are colorless to the camera. And this image by Akira Fuji, who is a pioneer night escape photographer, and you have seen his images on the Sky and Telescope through the years, gives you a very good example of what the natural color of the Milky Way is. Some images we do are for cultural relations. This image of the Milky Way in the southern hemisphere above sugar cans is from Brazil. And in Brazil, the Southern Cross, which is right in the center of the image, is very important, not only because it's very iconic, although small, but very prominent constellation in the night sky, but it is also because it's right in the middle of the Brazilian flag. And although I would say this is the most astronomical flag you can imagine. Some images are made for planetarium, like full dome images or fisheye panoramas. This one is from southern Germany in the Bavaria area where the famous Neuschwanstein Castle is located. This is another example made for a planetarium with a fisheye lens, and it's showing my friend Jim Lurie in West Texas. He's probably using one of the world's largest amateur telescopes, 48-inch Dobsonian next to McDonald Observatory. So there's a very broad spectrum of amateur astronomers and astrophotographers. Some are just using naked eye, and some are using giant telescopes and discover things. And this is one thing I really enjoy about amateur astronomy and astrophotography. There's such a broad spectrum of people. This is another friend of mine, Roger, who is a voice actor. And by daytime, he works for Hollywood, but by nighttime, he's following his main passion, his passion of capturing the night sky. My story started when I was 13, and I borrowed this telescope on the left side. This is a couple of years later. We already made a small group in Iran traveling to find darker skies away from Tehran. And this telescope was only 2.5-inch reflector. But the first look to the moon really changed my life. I couldn't believe how much details is visible through this telescope. It was around 91. Then I became a science journalist. I studied physics and started a TV program on astronomy space. It was weekly. This is about 20 years ago, I think. And then I started teaching astronomy to people, practical astronomy. So this was a group of amateur astronomers in Tehran who were observing frequently an hour, a couple of hours drive from the city at this site. Then my trips continued with solar eclipses here and there. This is where, in fact, the same trip where I first met Tom. I was familiar with Tom because of his book, which was one of the sky maps I used when I was a teenager, and later on. But then during this trip in 2006, we finally met in Panama. I was doing a documentary on solar eclipses between 1999 to 2009. So we went to all the continents to finish this documentary for a TV series. In 2009, this event reminded me of the same night I started seriously amateur astronomy when I was a teenager. This was a telescope on behalf of Astronomers Without Borders we brought to Nepal, and with Nepal Astronomical Society, we set up this event in Bhaktapur, Durbar Square, which is a World Heritage. And we didn't expect about 400, 500 people came to have a look through these telescopes for the first time. From here, I continued more professional photography, and then in 2007, it was the time when the World at Night project finally formed in collaboration with Astronomers Without Borders. Our group slowly is increasing in number. We are about 45 people now. One of the main messages within TWAN, although we are aiming to provide content for astronomy educators and media, but one of the main messages is a message of peace, that the night sky we see is shared by all humanity. When the new moon rises above these temples in Nepal, you see the same phenomena, the same window to the universe, regardless of what religion you're practicing. One people, one sky. And the night sky is a unifying roof above all of us. That's why it's important to bridge between history, culture, humanity, and art in these images. It's important to go to the World Heritage sites, because people can recognize these sites as the symbol of their country, and then they see this eternal roof above all countries. A recent trip a year ago in Guatemala, and some of these temples in Tikal are related to ancient astronomers, especially Pleiades, the Seven Sisters star cluster, was very important to Maya people for their calendar. Across the world, in Portugal, one of the ancient henges in southern part of Portugal, it's a bit older than Stonehenge and could be related to prehistoric astronomers or observers, or let's say timekeepers. There's a program by UNESCO called Astronomy and World Heritage, and we are in collaboration to provide images to them. Ancient petroglyph in central Iran, some are as old as the Ice Age, as the animals in the picture shows, with winter constellations in the night sky. Same place, and I was imaging another petroglyph. 5 years later, I realized there is not only pictures of animals here, a couple of leopard, Asiatic cheetah, wolf, but also a live animal in the picture too. That happens time to time in my time-lapse images. When I review them several years later, I realize I was not that alone that night. If you look on the upper left of the image, you probably now see this shadow of a fox, most probably, who was there for a part of the exposure and then moved. That's why it's like a ghost. Another example of history and iconic landmark here in New Zealand with Carina Nebula right above the iconic Church of Good Shepherd in Lake Tekapo, which is one of the IDA, International Dark Sky Association, designated locations as Darkest Sky Park. From New Zealand to Washington, D.C., on top of the Capitol, US Capitol, you find the Statue of Freedom. And the full moon was just passing behind. I was on assignment for National Geographic in DC for another project and decided to capture this too. And at the same moment, I was captured by a police officer. And that is another very typical part of my job. I'm honored to be captured by police officers in almost every country. And that's one of the challenges of night escape photography. Of course, capturing sometimes is just a few address and short conversation, and sometimes takes longer. But most of the time it ended up very happily, because most people have some interest to astronomy and night sky. As soon as you share that passion, they can communicate with you. And it was the same. In fact, the police officer was a National Geographic subscriber. So the story was very quickly went to the positive side. You find many examples of these images on TWAN website. We are now renovating our website with a new one. We had the record of probably the world's oldest looking website until now, but the new one is coming later this month. And you can find us on social media as well. We did a lot of exhibitions around the world, digital, and especially during the International Year of Astronomy. And we continue to do that thanks to our members in different countries. This was in a science center in Germany. My colleague there has a portable planetarium called the World at Night, and he takes it to most unusual places you can imagine for the show, wherever he can find audience to communicate astronomy using these images. Another message of TWAN is that night hides a world, but reveals a universe. I was walking on the bottom of this canyon in the Persian Gulf when I looked up and found this abstract view of a swan flying, a silhouette of a swan. And it reminded me of this old Persian saying, night hides a world, but reveals a universe. And exploring this hidden world is like adventure going to the cave, and you bring back this experience with most people who are mostly completely unaware of natural beauty of night sky today due to the light pollution. So it is really beyond an astronomer laboratory. The night sky is an essential part of our life. And it is very dynamic, as I mentioned in the beginning. You have all sorts of phenomena, from northern lights in high latitudes here in Iceland. Image appeared on National Geographic, a special edition, close-up view of this very, very intense aurora. It was KP9, the strongest activity of geomagnetic disturbance we had in 15 years. Or this one is a crown overhead in Lapland. To solar eclipses, thousands of people are traveling for eclipses. To conjunctions, Venus and Jupiter, two bright beacons in the celestial hemisphere shining next to the Lagoon Nebula in this very rare conjunction. To zodiacal light, which is best visible from dark sides. To comets, from Comet Hale-Bopp in '97, which was the first assigned image I did as a photographer. To this recent comet, it's another single exposure of about 2.5 minutes from a darkest sky site in Massachusetts. To fireballs and meteors. This is another meteor I'd like to share with you because you're mostly amateur astronomers, and I believe some of you are experienced photographers. If you find some of these, please send to me. I'm collecting evidence of meteors with non-straight path. If you have a closer look, this is almost like a zigzag, and they're not that common, but they're there. Some astronomers argued with me that these are mainly vibration of my camera, the sensor, or vibration caused by the mirror. but even they appear in mirrorless cameras. And there are some visual observers through the history who recorded a few of them as well. So I'm collecting more data related to these meteors. Or atmospheric phenomena, such as this one, which is related to a rocket. And it was very puzzling to me when I first saw one of these. This scene was back in 2006 or 7. And then I realized it's not that rare. People see it time to time, especially from places near the rocket activities. And I put them together from different countries, and you see them in these two slides, especially the one on the lower right is quite breathtaking. Could be an illustration of a wormhole. Or these from other countries. So mostly there are failed missions, had some kind of issue, extra fuel left and ejected out. Some are the light caused by as the rocket is going through the atmosphere, but most of them are the extra fuel ejected out after the rocket is outside of our atmosphere, but still in low orbit, such as 200 miles, even 150 miles, 100 miles. Even lower to the ground, we have other atmospheric phenomena, which is commonly captured by nighttime photographers, lightning, for example. A single exposure with very high dynamic range showing you the Milky Way and this stunning lightning storm, a supercell on the horizon from Haleakala, Hawaii. My second camera, doing a time lapse, captured the very same lightning in a close-up shot. Sometimes above lightning, when the condition is right, you see red sprites. Sprites have been difficult to photograph in the past, but now with digital cameras and very fast lenses, you see more and more of these images frequently. These are in West Texas, a close-up image of a red sprite through a telephoto lens. An air glow. This particular image is enhanced beyond my usual way because it's used for fine art galleries of National Geographic. These galleries are across the country in several states, not in Arizona yet, but there's one in Las Vegas, another one in Texas, and couple of them in Southern California. So the air glow is natural emission of the Earth atmosphere at altitude of about 60 miles or so. It's pretty high at the edge of a space. And they look completely colorless to the eyes. When they're very active, it's almost the sky like misty form. It's not cloudy and the sky is dark. You're in a perfect condition, but the sky doesn't look good contrast and the Milky Way is not that bold as usual. Then you realize air glow activity is very high. And when you take a picture, you see green, orange, and yellow colors. Usually the green is more near the midnight and orange and yellow is more closer to the beginning and end of the night. And this was the most intense air glow I have ever photographed in my entire career. It was the night I was in Grand Teton at this point, which is known as the Ansel Adams Point because of this very famous image of the Snake River and Grand Teton. These are the galleries at the moment. If you travel to one of these areas, I highly recommend you to have a look. Also, you can find the gallery images on the website and on their social media feed on Instagram. Now we are again at Grand Canyon, but the story of this moonlit night of Grand Canyon is not the beauty of the canyon, which is unrivaled. It is the light dome on the right side of the image. That far light about 90 miles away is from Page in northern Arizona, but not only from Page, but also from a power station, which I believe I heard it's no longer active, but I could be wrong. And this power station, when I photographed it, was very intensely bright, and it's causing a lot of light going exactly to space. If you look at these high clouds passing by, it's completely illuminated by the power station. And that shows you how much light pollution is created. Light is used by a variety of ways and forms and reasons. Sometimes it's for art, like here in Prague. The new moon is setting over the World Heritage, and light here is definitely part of the art. Sometimes light is identity. Cities with bright lights like Paris, they use it as identity, or Las Vegas. Sometimes light is formed as expression of feeling, or again, art, like here is a light festival in Portugal. They do it every year in September with installations. And sometimes light is for security and safety, but we don't know exactly how to use it properly now in the world. The knowledge is new, and unfortunately, most people are not aware of the term light pollution yet. For amateur astronomers, this could be surprising, but I can guarantee you more than 90% of people around the world are not familiar with the term light pollution yet. And this is pretty new to them. And I can tell you from my talks in different countries, and I have to go from the very beginning of this term because nobody have heard about it yet. And then comes the new problem of LED lights, the white blue LED lights, which are more harmful and scattering more light. It's very difficult to filter them for astrophotographers, but above all of these, it's affecting human body as well. This is an image by my colleague Ajay Talwar from Australia, and the Melbourne, Sydney, the Sydney Opera House is in a typical night. However, above them, in this long exposure, you see trails of birds captured over the night. So any time of the night you go there, these birds are actively moving around the lights because the lights brings a lot of insects, and some of these are migrating birds. They're captured by these lights when they move around above the cities. These bright lights going to the sky are completely disturbing their navigation system. And these lights take them to the cities. Some of them die the first night or even impact into the building. And some die the next days because now they're lost in the cities and they cannot survive. That's why, according to IDA, the International Dark Sky Association, there is almost 4 billion birds dying related to light pollution, either directly or indirectly every year. Here in Dubai, the city which doesn't have massive population like New York City or large cities, but it has really a lot of light, and most of them are unnecessary. Some of these towers are completely empty, but they advertise their spaces by bright lights at nighttime. And this is very common use of light, advertising. Look at these two panoramas. They have similar field of view, similar orientation, but about 50 miles away, taken one in Tehran, a metropolitan of 15 million population now, and another one at high altitude of Alborz Mountains, 50 miles away. So the night sky you see at the upper part should be visible in the lower image too, but it's completely vanished. In the observatories and ideal stargazing locations, the night sky is still pure, and these last remaining dark skies are preserved by astronomers, environmentalists, and also a new industry, emerging industry called astrotourism, part of ecotourism. In your state of Arizona, near the city of Tucson, we have the National Observatory, Kitt Peak, and the night sky above Kitt Peak is still pretty good, although you can see in this large 360-degree panorama, you can see both Tucson and Phoenix. There are very large light domes on the horizon. However, because of the altitude and transparency of the place, you get above this scattering area. So the light dome of these cities are not much scattered to the sky, to overhead. I could record the phenomenon known as Gegenschein from Kitt Peak on that night on some of the images I made with fisheye projection. And that really surprised me in such a close distance to Tucson, and also in where Phoenix is boldly visible over the north, you could see such phenomena in the night sky. So if you're looking for dark sky locations, consider the altitude as well. Because if you go to a very low altitude place and far from cities, still you see a lot of scattering. But in high altitude locations, even closer to the cities, you may get darker sky. So this is a very important factor which is not visible in light pollution maps. Over the years, the light pollution is changing in many countries, is increasing in most part of the world, except for a few countries which the economy is collapsing. The rest, you see explosion of lights. Here, you're looking at Europe and North Africa. The best view is probably by an astronaut. Like Don Petit, my good friend, who is also an astrophotographer, has done a lot of astrophotography from the International Space Station. A view from Space Station through the window by a fisheye lens showing something quite interesting here. It looks like an island in the center, but this is the country of North Korea. And if you compare the capital with Seoul on the right side, you see how much difference you see. And of course, this is not in hand of the population, the residents, but they switch off the lights a few hours after sunset in most part of the country. So that's why it's so dark. It's like a paradise for astrophotographers, but I would say with a one-way ticket. In most part of the world, especially in East Asia, India, China, Japan, Korea, a lot of white blue LEDs are installed over the past few years. In the US, thanks to American Medical Association, with the announcement in 2016, this change has been slowed down and changed to warmer LEDs. AMA announced officially on that year that white blue LEDs are harmful to human body by changing the circadian rhythm or sleep cycle. And exposure, long exposure to it, if it's next to your bedroom window, for example, could be quite bad in long term and cause even related to cancer. A couple of cancers at the moment are related, not as the main contribution, but as one of them. So it's a serious issue. But investment has already done in many countries, and it's hard to change it. But for those places which has not changed to white blue LEDs, it's a good call to control these. And there are warmer LEDs available, although they may be a bit more expensive. Some claim it's less energy efficient. I can't really find a proof on that. And there is discussion on this, what kind of LEDs is suitable, not to be at the same time energy efficient and less problematic for human body and other species. This is an example in Thailand. My colleague Jeff Tai captured this shot recently, and he was there a few years ago. Before this image, it was completely dark sky location. Now it's almost like daytime when you walk in this village. I put together some information about dark sky places and how to find them on this new page on my website. You can have a look later on. And this is a typical map of light pollution showing the east coast of the US. You see plenty of lights with the red and yellow and purple areas near the cities. As you go to blue, it becomes dark enough to see the Milky Way. And as you get to gray and black, it becomes ideal location. And you're in a state in Arizona where there are still plenty of dark sky locations. I did a project a year ago for National Geographic for a feature article on light pollution on their website. And the project is started in Death Valley In Death Valley, we have one of the world's largest darkest sky locations, designated darkest sky parks. But at this vista, high altitude, you still boldly see two light pollution. On the left side, almost like sunrise, but this is Las Vegas from 90 miles away. And on the right side, even more surprisingly, is Los Angeles from 150 miles away. So these cities are visible from very far distances easily to the eyes, and more evidently, of course, to the camera. This is the view of Las Vegas from Death Valley. As we get closer, this is about 20 miles away, you notice there is something strange coming out of Las Vegas. There is a blue ray of light, which is in fact visible from the space station as well as a bright point of light, because it's going right towards the space. A total waste of energy, but it's now a part of identity of the city. And that's why it's sometimes hard to negotiate about light pollution and change it when it becomes the identity. Now we are closer, we are inside the city, and now we're right at the source of the light, the Hotel Casino Luxor, which is shining this light from late 1980s. Imagine how many years, every night this is shining. And the amount of light inside this house, inside this room on top, is enough to run the lights of 2 major hospitals, according to calculation done by an expert. But the amount of waste of energy is not that significant because it's LED. The amount of issues it's creating for birds passing by and animals would be much more important. An example of bat flying through the light. As I was there before, the guard showed me the way out because I didn't have permission. And as soon as I mentioned National Geographic, they realized this is about the birds because they know about this issue. This has been there for a long time. And it's attracting a lot of migrating birds, hundreds of bats you can see around it. It has created its own ecosystem. It's in the middle of Las Vegas. So once you're in the city, have a look and you will see what I'm talking about. There are thousands of insects all of a sudden flying above these lights, and that's why there's so many bats have moved from their natural environment, came here, and then after exhaustion, they die, of course, as well as the birds passing by. And Las Vegas is just one example of many other locations. I think it's our responsibility as night sky photographers and stargazers to communicate light pollution issues with more people, not from the perspective of an astronomer, but from perspective of environment, from the perspective of energy, and from perspective of future of this planet. Light pollution has changed the nighttime view of our planet completely over the past 1 century. So these are the perspectives that can ignite some new ideas and people and moving towards more night sky friendly societies. This is the article, and if you go to my website /media, you will find that, or just simply Google Nat Geo light pollution. In the book of the World at Night, which is published about less than a year ago, it's a pretty new book I did, together with my colleagues. I have written the book and made some of the images, but the rest of the images are selected from my colleagues' work. So it's a very international book. It's released in 4 languages now, and you will find it on my website. The last 2 chapters is on light pollution, places with darkest skies, and the other chapters are illustrating other messages of Tuan. I hope you enjoyed. This would be the last image from the southern coast of New Zealand in night of November 2019. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Babak. That was fantastic. We have a couple questions. One of them, Joy Baker was wondering if you remember which Canon camera model it was that you switched to when you went from film to digital.
It was Canon 5D Mark I and 20D, these two.
Ah, okay. It was what, 20D and the Canon Mark, I forget.
Mark I, 5D Mark I. Yes, that was the first decent full frame digital camera I found by Canon. Also, Nikon had D3, which was an amazing camera for its time. A lot of images from a space station were done by that D3S camera.
Okay, there's another one. Do you still take any film-based photo, or are you 100% digital now?
I'm completely digital, but my colleague, Oshin Zakarian, for example, who is also part of the board at night, is still using medium format cameras for film, and is pretty satisfied with the result of long exposures. Yeah, if you have one of these in your storage, and you can find film easily nowadays, they're back in business, in fact. So just try 100 film and go somewhere dark, let it run for 1 or 2 hours, long exposure, and you will see what I'm talking about.
And there's another, just a compliment, Tom Curry loves your photos, and all the dark sky features were even impressive to a accomplished amateur such as Tom. Yeah, and you said your book is available on widely available.
Yeah, it's either on bookstores, or I also provide signed copies only within the US through my website. But if you want a regular copy, it's available anywhere, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or any bookstore, major bookstore.
Great, I think I'll visit your website tomorrow. Let's see, how do you deal with the Starlink trails from Joan?
It's a very good question. And in fact, I'm in touch with some of the experts working for SpaceX. I did some advice to them from my field of work, but it's going to be down to magnitude 8, the best thing they can do. And this is not during the orbit rising. During the orbit rising, it could be quite bright, up to 4, 5, 3, even 2, but no longer -2 or -1. These were before they adjusted the satellites. Now there's a shade in new ones. So after they reach the proper orbit, 500 kilometers or so, then they're going to be around magnitude between 7 to 9. Back to my slide, which I mentioned about how deep we can get on night escape photography. So most of these would be really faint in the images after they reach the maximum orbit. But if you're using a telephoto lens or any kind of longer exposure, deeper sky imaging, they will be very visible. Some organization like ESO, European Southern Observatory, is working on a software which is going to be widely available to remove these streaks in stacking easily without spending too much time. And they're working for their own telescope because they realize this seems to be not possible to stop. Unfortunately, you know, it's a bit too late. And astronomical societies, the community of astronomers were not powerful enough to do that, or maybe too slow. And the SpaceX experts are doing their best too to change this, but there is no way they can make it fainter than magnitude 8 or 9. And this is still pretty bright for telescopes and telephoto lenses. It's not going to be a major issue for night escape photographers or naked eye stargazers. It won't be an issue for them because it's only in orbit rising stage that you're going to see them. And after a while, it will gradually get fainter. However, is this the only company which is going to do that? That's another major question. And without any legislation, we don't know how many other companies are going to do that. And are they also listening to astronomers, or they will continue on their own. For example, SpaceX is in communication with astronomers, with AES and other places, and they really want to change that. But there is a limit. They cannot make it fainter than that.
Yeah, last week, one of our members, Claude Haynes, he gave a member presentation showing us not only Starlink, but 3 or 4 other companies that had even grander plans than Tesla or Starlink. So like you say, that's going to be with us for a while.
Yeah, well, I think this is something to be done through UN, because it's not only US that is active in these fields. It needs to be done in very large scale through IAU, AES, and even not only astronomers, but organizations which are active in general environment health of the planet, because this is really related to the general environment of our planet, not only astronomers.
And I think that was the last question. There's one in the chat saying, thanking you because he's a environmental science teacher at the secondary level, and you're giving him lots of new talking points. So he thanks you very much. And,
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
and with that,
So
I'll switch over to Gordon.
Yeah, Babak, thank you very much. I've been looking through the chats, and I'll give a summary of many, many chats. Wow. That's generally the response that you're getting. Fantastic photos. What I'm going to do here is, let's see, can you guys see me okay?
That's a yes. Yes.
Yeah, you guys can see me okay?
Right.
All right. What I just want to do is just take just a couple minutes, because this was a lot of astrophotography stuff, and the board of directors and me personally, we're getting questions about beginning astrophotography. And what I just wanted to do is take just a couple minutes as we close this out, is saying the very first thing is one of these devices. And it's what you use to attach your smartphone to the eyepiece. And it looks kind of like something to make spies talk. All I can say about it is that it works. Sometimes it can be more frustrating than motivational, but that's sometimes the very first thing. The second thing, those who are really interested, is your digital camera, which I have right here. This is an older Canon Rebel. But what you'll hear is it needs a T adapter, or a T ring, I'm sorry, a T ring. And this is a T ring. And so what it does is it will replace your lens with an adapter. All it does is snap in there like your lens would. Now you can take an adapter. So we have the T ring that attaches to the camera, and then we have a T ring adapter. Now these come in different lengths, as you can see here, because you'll have to play around to get the length for your focus. So the T ring snaps just like a lens does into your camera. The T ring, you have to be manufacturer specific. So if you have a Canon, it has to be a Canon T ring, a Nikon, it has to be a Nikon T ring. This happens to be Canon. So then I'll take the adapter and it just screws in there. And so what I have now is I have a replacement for my eyepiece. And I can make it longer by doing other adapters or playing around with these. If I have a 2-inch eyepiece, there's a 2-inch adapter here that also will screw into the T-rings. So I just put this on, a replacement for the eyepiece. And then I start playing around. For beginning astrophotography, you've got to start knowing your camera. Play around with focuses, exposures, ISOs. You will make a lot of mistakes, but you'll learn more from your mistakes and your errors than you will from your successes. And as you begin, you're going to be making a lot of mistakes, which means that you're going to be learning a lot. So that's really the first step in actual taking astrophotography. Get outside, hook your camera up, and start pressing buttons. Now, I've been getting questions sent to me through President on our website, the President Contact. Write me. Click on that link in there. An email comes on up, it comes to me and says, hey, Gordon, where can I get this key ring? And the thing is that you can get them basically at any telescope shop, OPT, online, B&H Photo. But if you have a specific question, write to me. Now, I'm not a Tom Polakis or a Babak, but I have been playing around, and I'm a beginner also, and it is a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, very rewarding. So anyway, that's it for me. My little 2-3 minutes about those people who are wanting to get started. Anyone else have any contact or comments?
Well, I'm going to say goodbye because it's midnight here. So
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Babak. It's
thank you. But I'm going to invite everyone who is on Instagram to my page, because that's where I share my newest stories and most of my new images. I'm not that active on Facebook anymore, but mainly on Instagram. So thank you, EVAC, and thank you, everyone.
Okay.
bye-bye.
Well, guys, if that is all the comments, I think I'll give a 3-second countdown. And we have to just remember that our next meeting next month is on Friday, the 18th of September, 7:30, normal start time. And Dr. Roger Windhorst will be talking about the James West Telescope and our James Webb Telescope, which is still out there. So I'll give a countdown. Any comments? Okay, 3, 2, 1. Bye, folks.